So what's going to be the difference between them? In a normal, healthy adult person, whether male or female, okay? And note my terminology that I'm saying healthy adult, okay? And that's probably going to be referring to someone in their 20s. Before that and after that is not considered the norm. I know, weird, right? Okay? Well, that's because infants, babies, kids, whatever, all right, their breathing rate's going to be a little more rapid, okay? Now, after we get past those 20s, I mean, let's face it, you guys, I try to give you all the good warning, stuff's going to start falling apart, okay? I mean, that's just the norm, okay? So, the norm is a range of roughly being about in their 20s. So, in the normal, healthy adult, this space of either being anatomical or physiological should be about equal. One should not be outweighing, or one should not be more than the other. It should be about the same, and therefore, in that normal adult, there should be very few non-functional alveoli, meaning that almost every one of those alveoli should be working. Now, in the dead space, well, anatomical, what does that tell me? It tells me that there's no gas exchange in areas of the anatomy. Physiological, there's no gas exchange in some of the function of the lungs, of the respiratory system. This is telling me not all of these alveoli, not all of the air goes just to the alveoli. A certain amount of it, and this is dependent on body weight, okay? It fluctuates in what we term the normal adult, okay? Some of it actually stays in the conducting vision. What part was that?
Wouldn't that be those capillaries, blood?
My conducting division?
Oh, no.
Rebecca, you were getting ready to say something. From the nose to basically the trachea. All right? Why is it staying behind in this division? What was important in this division that had to be done?
Filtration.
Huh?
Filtration.
We need to filter, warm, and moisten. Okay? So we need to filter, warm, and moisten the air. These are the areas that are considered the anatomical dead space. The physiological, it's the sum of any of the air that's going to be found in these regions or these areas, plus anything that doesn't get exchanged in the alveoli. If something doesn't get exchanged, if the gas exchange doesn't take place in the alveoli, once again, it's usually due to something being wrong. There's a pathology that's going to be present, okay? For example, edema. Edema was what? Swelling, the building up of the fluid, okay? Can that happen in the lungs? Yes, you can have fluid on the lungs, okay? Oh my goodness, have you ever known someone who has? Ooh, I can't imagine them having to take that huge needle and go in and try to pull that stuff off.
My dad just had a liter and a half done.
Ooh.
Because he had open heart surgery and it's still healing.
Okay, oh my goodness. All right, what do I mean by fibrosis? Hardening of the tissue. Okay? Huh? Hardening of what tissue? My lung tissue. What could make my lung tissue be fibrotic?
Radiation.
You might have some type of surgery that may have had to happen to it. There could have been some type of damaging disorder that happened. Might have ended up with pneumonia too many times. Might have the lung cancer. Okay? Something that has made that lung tissue non-functional. Okay? Because when something becomes fibrotic, it's no longer functional. It's no longer a functional tissue. Once again, I'm going to use my example of emphysema. In emphysema, those alveolar walls, as they begin to break down, because what will happen is they'll continue to break down, because the one thing about emphysema, there is no cure. Okay? So it's just a progressive disease that will continue. So you simply take, and it'll continue to break down. 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 And now I have one huge grape versus a bunch. Now, in this particular situation with emphysema, because that has happened, this means I now have much fewer functioning alveoli. Is that correct? Because I've taken the one that had quite a few, and I've only made it one. And this will be something that is progressive throughout that entire amount of tissue.
So is it fatal?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, people who get diagnosed with emphysema, there is no cure, there is no hope. The only thing that's going to happen is it's going to be a progressive disorder that's going to affect them for the rest of their life. To the point that they're not going to be able to have, I mean, their oxygen, they might have to go from being on 5% oxygen to 10 to 20 to the point where the lungs just can't function anymore.
What's the difference between that? Like, what is emphysema in conjunction with like COPD? You hear that a lot.
Now, COPD, chronic obstructive pulmonary disorder. This means anything that's going to be obstructing the air flow. So if you think about something that's going to obstruct the air flow, we're looking at something that affects to this point. So if we think about having this duct, that duct having smooth muscle, okay, something that'll cause them to constrict too much, okay, something that might not cause them to constrict. COPD, I think, is a term, and Rebecca, you can correct me if you know. COPD is a term that they give as a generalized problem other than it just being emphysema.
Right, along with
bronchitis, people who might have chronic bronchitis, the asthma that can be pretty severe for people, you know. So I think COPD is a general term that has an umbrella effect to different things that are there. Emphysema is strictly to itself. It's a lung disorder that's working on the actual tissue at that alveolar level and destroying the tissue.
Is it genetic or can you cause it?
You cause it for the most part. You cause it by stuff that you smoke. Notice it's stuff, because that means anything. Okay? It could be that it's a workplace hazard. You might have worked somewhere, the air wasn't exactly perfect or filtered correctly, and you end up having emphysema. Not talking about something like mesothelioma or black lung disease, okay? We can actually, every single day, did you guys know that we are part of the, there's only a few counties that make up 50% of Virginia's population, like us, some of the counties up north, and some of them east at the beach. We make up 50% of Virginia's population. The remaining whole part of the state is 50%. What do you think our air quality is here? Have y'all ever paid attention to our air quality here in Richmond?
Everyone has a car.
It's very poor. We don't have mass transit, okay? They just didn't design the city to have mass transportation, okay? Our air quality here is very poor. We breathe it every day, all day long. It can actually be something that's secondhand.
So my grandpa worked in a fiberglass factory. He died of lung cancer.
He had mesothelioma, asbestos, the little fibers. What happens with that is the fibers that he's being exposed to, he's inhaling those fibers, and those fibers make their way into these alveoli, and they begin to embed themselves into the tissue. Well, it's not something that's normal, okay? It's foreign. Our body doesn't have any way to get rid of it. And what'll happen is the tissues will react to it, okay? So the cancer portion of it is that those tissues basically begin to fill up with fluids. And that's the cancer part, because even though it's not anything that's a genetic component, it's caused by those fibers that have actually embedded themselves into that tissue. And basically they just drown.
So even though we couldn't do anything about that, like our body couldn't, would our immune system still kick in and try to fight it? No?
No, because there's nothing in the lung tissues at that level. The only thing we have is that little dust cell that's a macrophage, and it's too much. It overwhelms that macrophage. So, you know, as you can see, the respiratory system, we're going to have many things that can affect it, all right? Anything that will begin to obstruct that airflow, anything, okay, is going to decrease the lung function. That means we are going to decrease the ability of that gas exchange, which is important. If I affect that gas exchange at this level, at these capillaries, if I affect this gas exchange, what have I now done to every other tissue of the body? I have affected every other tissue of the body. There's no tissue left untouched by a respiratory disorder. Because if I have a respiratory disorder that's decreasing my ability for the movement of oxygen, well, I've now allowed CO2 to be higher in my tissues. So anything that becomes a disorder in this system, okay, it's going to affect everything else about your life. And the quality of your life goes down tremendously with a lung disorder. Now, the way that we're going to measure the function of the lungs, we're going to measure it using a spirometer. And therefore, measurement is termed spirometry. Now, I tried to find a picture of one that you would probably see once you get into your clinicals. There's lots of other spirometers that are out there, okay? But the goal is to make, to get that person to breathe into the spirometer and then move. And, you know, the higher it goes, the better your lung capacity. All right? Which could be indicative of the lungs' function. Yes, no, maybe?